Hi, everybody. Frank Gladstone here from ASIFA-Hollywood. Hello, Zagreb. Nice to see all of you, at least virtually. And today we have, as our contribution, we have our friends from Cartoon Saloon. We're going to talk about Wolfwalkers and their other projects as well. So I'm going to start with introductions. You can see them there. First, I'm going to start with Mark Mullery. Mark has worked in animation as an editor, a supervisor, as an episode director for several things at Cartoon Saloon in the TV set. So stop me if I'm wrong, Mark. Mark was raised by wolves in Ireland. Is that correct, Mark? You were raised by wolves. Is that correct?
All verified, all true. Yeah.
Okay, and has worked at Cartoon Saloon since 2013, right from the wolf pack, right into.
Well, we tamed him first. We had to sort that.
I understand you had to housebreak him, Tom.
Had to housebreak him. Yeah.
That took years.
Yeah, and worked with Nora on The Breadwinner, and most recently, of course, as assistant director with on Wolfwalkers. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, close enough. Perfect.
Now I'm going to try and say Maria's name properly in España. Maria Pareja.
Very good. Fantastic.
My Miami, Florida Spanish. Production designer, raised and art director, raised in Spain, in Madrid. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. And initially was studying to be an engineer, but that didn't work out. Didn't like it. I don't blame you. And went and studied animation in Madrid, and joined Cartoon Saloon just a few years ago, 2018, initially as an illustrator. And also you are an Annie Award, or was the production designer on the Annie Award nominated There's a Monster in My Kitchen. Actually, you won. I think you guys won that this year, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty good. And also was production designer on Wolfwalkers, of course. Illustrates children's books on the side. Plays music. What's your instrument, Maria?
I play the flute.
Very good. So does my wife. She plays the flute too.
Nice.
And loves plants and doodles. And she's often on the train, doodling people on the train.
I used to be, not anymore. No training continues.
And then this other newcomer, hardly just started at Cartoon Saloon, Tomm Moore, actually was co-founded Cartoon Saloon with, I think, Ross and Nora. Is that right, Tom?
Oh yeah, and Paul, yeah.
And Paul, yeah, and has worked on as an art director, as a director, as a storyboarder, as an animator, everything. Sometimes carries the trash out to the bin, and all that kind of stuff. Started, of course, on Secret of the Kells with Nora, Song of the Sea. Did the On Love segment from The Prophet, which was very Klimt inspired, and then and now, of course, with Ross Stewart and with Mark on Wolfwalkers. So there's the introductions. Before we go any further, though, if I do this properly, I'm going to try and play about a 5-minute thing that you guys put together during the Wolfwalkers release for people. It showed at Annecy. We've shown it before. About the process. So let me go ahead and try and share screen here. And once I do, I will ask you all, including me, to turn off your video and your sound, and we'll run this.
This is a sequence that we're really excited to present. It's a sequence we call Running with the Wolves. And in the script, it was barely there. It was just a few lines saying that the girls enjoy their time in their new bodies as wolves. But we felt that, Ross and I felt that for the movie, it needed a pause point, a kind of a tent pole, a moment of kind of mindfulness where Robin got to really discover what it was to be a wolf and explore all the new senses and have a really joyful moment as a wolf. So we really saw the world that she wishes she could be part of whenever she's stuck back in the town. So it's kind of a tent pole emotional moment in the middle of the movie, and it's also a time for us to show off and play with all the techniques we've been experimenting with. And we were lucky enough, we knew we needed a good song for it, we weren't quite sure what, and I just ran into Aurora Aknes's music by accident, and I was on a run one day and I came back and our editor tried it out and we said that song works great, and that sort of became the bedrock for the sequence because we boarded to the song and finally even managed to re-record a special version of it with Aurora for the final movie. So you'll hear that after we go through the making of it and the techniques.
There you could just see some storyboards and layouts and then rough animation, and really because this is a pause point and quite free, the storyboarders were able to try out all kinds of really interesting wipes and transitions, and we were able to put in some wolf vision shots and some wolf hearing shots, and try out some some clever uses of perspective and flat perspective, and yeah, you can see there when we go into clean animation how free it is, and Maria kind of art directed this sequence and tended to make it a bit more painterly. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So for this sequence we were trying to make it like super free and loose, either in the line and in the color. So we were taking a lot of inspiration in Princess Kaguya and the illustrations from Cyril Pedrosa, because they all have a very nice flow and the line is so rough and so nice. So we were trying to bring that all in all the backgrounds and stuff, but even in the cleanup of the characters. And then for the color, everything was like very free and like kind of like an illustrations. That's why some of the backgrounds has like the borders or the edges like bleeding a little bit, the watercolors. So it was like a little bit everything like super free and bluish and pinks and purples, like because it's the very special magic moment of the girls. So it was very, very lovely.
Why do you want to be here? Being a wolf is way better. I'll show you. Can you smell me?
Of course. Everybody can.
Well, close your eyes. You don't need your eyes to see. And you can hear every little thing that moves. And your paws can hear through the earth. And you have 4 legs now. You can run really fast and jump so high.
And my mind still. Hey, wait for me. Are we running out of time?
Keep your nose down. Be a wolf.
All the echoes in my mind cry. There's blood on your lies, and the sky's open wide. There is nowhere for you to hide. The hunter's moon is shining. I'm running with the wolves tonight. I'm running with the wolves. I'm running with the wolves tonight. I'm running with the wolves. I'm running with the laughter.
You're letting them out. The forest is ours at night. Wait till you see.
My spirit talks. I am everything. Are we running out of time? All the echoes in my mind cry. There's blood on your lies. The sky's open wide. There is nowhere for you to hide. The hunter's moon is shining. I'm running with the wolves tonight. I'm running with the wolves. I'm running with the wolves tonight. I'm running with the wolves. I'm running with the
Everybody back?
That was great.
There you go. Hey, you got a movie about that.
Yeah.
Before we get started, that music is really good.
Isn't it?
It's really great. And, you know, in this particular song, it sounds like the singer sounds like the voices of the cast.
Yeah, that's what really attracted me to it. Yeah, the fact that Aurora, she was only 17 when she first recorded it, and so she doesn't sound, she sounds pretty much the same age as Robin. So it
Yeah.
could be Robin's inner world or whatever, you know.
It really works well. I have lots of questions. The first one is one that I hear often asked about Cartoon Saloon, both myself and other people, and it's a pretty.
How are we all so beautiful?
Yes,
We only hire beautiful people.
Well, at least in Maria's case. But the one I hear often is, and it's not exactly phrased this way, but it's the notice that Cartoon Saloon focuses on, in quotes, more traditional animation technique. I'm not talking about style. I'm talking about 2D. You know, and I wonder if that was a conscious thing. Is that part of the studio approach? How do you feel? You seem to be the champion in feature films anyway now of the use of traditional animation.
Yeah, I mean, hand-drawn was where we started, and with a bit of a manifesto that we wanted to see what could still be done with hand-drawn while everyone else was running away from it. At the same time, I would say, particularly for Ross and myself on Wolfwalkers, it was a little bit more focused on traditional media than we recently had been, you know. We use computers a lot, like we even draw frame by frame on Cintiqs. We don't animate on paper, but we still paint the backgrounds on paper and draw the backgrounds. And, you know, there's still a huge amount of focus on traditional media, but it's a real blend, you know, and aspects of Wolfwalkers were animated on paper. Other aspects of it were animated in TV paint, and it's kind of a blend. But yeah, in terms of the drawing skills, I think that's kind of the backbone of the studio. I think that's the focus in the studio and continues to be. Unless an amazing young director comes along with a brilliant idea to do it some other way, and who knows, we might be tempted. But generally, yeah, we're pretty focused on hand-drawn in the studio.
Well, Maria, if the backgrounds are illustrated still, I guess that was you were working mostly in black.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we were doing everything. Well, we use a lot Photoshop because at the end of the day, you need to have the layers separated to work with the animation and everything. So even though we were doing a lot of stuff on traditional media, like with the watercolors and pencils and stuff like that, at the end of the day, we were putting all together with Photoshop. So it's like what Tom said, is at the end, it's like a blend of traditional media and digital.
Yeah, and I guess you guys like it that way. Mark, any opinion about that? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what attracted me to the studio entirely was that it was a place where we could try to make films out of drawings and paintings, you know, nothing much more complicated than that. That's what I think is sort of so beautiful about this. Maria's right to say that, like, and Tom as well, that technology plays a huge part. We're not Luddites. We don't pretend that this stuff isn't there, but we ask ourselves, what can the technology do to afford us the ability to still just try to make things that are, you know, a little bit more, yeah, handmade in this world, kind of just drawings, paintings, just try to think that way. And we use computers for lots of that, but we just don't want to fit into, I think, the kind of, you know, cookie cutter ad agency 3D kind of thing. We want a workshop feel, and technology kind of allows us to do that at the same time, you know.
So do you guys feel that, you know, as you've done several features now, all nominated for Oscars and Annie Awards and everything else in the world, and you do have a sort of what is a house style in a way. I mean, Wolfwalkers looks different than Kells, looks different than Breadwinner and so forth, but there is this kind of an idea, at least in the animation industry, when folks in our industry look at it, there is a Cartoon Saloon feel to the films, and that's something that seems to have developed over time since the first.
Yeah, and it depends on the director how conscious they are. I think a lot of it is kind of what you get when you take all our influences and our focus and the type of stuff we're looking at, and I think that the style changes, and I'm happy for that, depending on the director, depending on the art director, you know. But generally, I think there's some definitely like common ground in all our influences so far. But I like that we keep on expanding it. I like some of the projects that are in development, and in production now in the studio, they feel associated with Cartoon Saloon, but they're definitely second or third cousins to Secret of Kells, not brothers or sisters, if you know what I mean. Like they're evolving out, you know.
Well, yeah,
and I think as well, there's this idea like, what's art and what's craft. And there's a quote I read recently by Gore Vidal saying that, the art should always be different, but the craft should always be the same. And I think, we're trying to have a workshop of a couple of hundred people all trying to work together on something. If you're trying to make something with hundreds of people, you have to try to get your craft honed. And so I see similarities between the movies in the ways that they're made, but the differences in the art you can really see in the people who are involved. And I think, I understand that there are aspects in like The Breadwinner where you might see sort of character design overlap a little bit from some of the people who are kind of involved along there. But I also think in a way, artistically, they're worlds apart,
Oh yeah, I do too. I mean, they're obviously, at least for me, when I watch the films, there's obviously differences between each one. There's this 2D traditional approach, but the films look different, and speaking of influences, I know that there are lots of influences. I know that one of them was Marcel Yankovic, who just passed away lately, but he was an independent filmmaker. I think an Academy Award nominee, or maybe a winner years ago for Sisyphus, but also most legendarily for Son of the White Mare, a film I think he did by himself. And it is
more or less, yeah.
And it's quite different than most. It's now become legendary. We finally got able to look at it about a year ago. And UPA, and what are the other influences that you, besides Gore Vidal? That's the first time, I must say, the first time in any Q&A I've ever done where an animator has brought up Gore Vidal.
That's what Mark is here for, the literary illusion. The rest of us only talk about cartoons.
Maria, you were in Spain. You wanted to work at Cartoon Saloon. I guess you saw the pictures. What was that an influence, or what are the other influences for all of you that have brought you this far?
Well, for me, I just really like the style of the studio. So it was just so refreshing to see something different to Disney or to whatever other studio. So it was just like wanting to do something original. It was the inspiration for me to trying to work in the movie. And once we were there, we had like a lot of influence from Cyril Pedrosa and Emily Hughes, because the illustrations were really nice and they had a really nice feeling of that wilderness that we wanted to bring to the movie. So I think those were the main ones. And the Princess Kaguya movie really inspired this sequence that you showed before. So I think it was just like trying to do something different, what is most inspired.
Well, I definitely think some of the DNA of the so-called Cartoon Saloon style goes back like before Maria's time, and we were really happy that Maria wanted to work with us because it meant that, a new fresh voice was coming into the studio. But what Ross and I had done early on is we'd shown some of the crew, the Son of the White Mare, or in particular the Hungarian folktales that Marcel Yankovic directed, and they were so cool to see because we don't usually see hand-drawn animation pushed to that extreme. So anytime somebody who was coming off a movie like Klaus, or who was a fan of Disney animation, and they thought what we were doing was super stylized, I'd say, well, no, look at what they were doing in Zagreb, in Hungary. We're not anywhere near as stylized as you could go. So it's always kind of cool to see other people pushing the boat out. And I'm always excited to see those types of films being remembered and appreciated,
It's interesting because the Zagreb, the iteration of the film festival now started from the old film festival, and that was the one where you saw the European animation, that looked different than what we were experiencing.
It was so legendary. We won a prize there for Secret of Kells, and it was so exciting. It was right at the start of Secret of Kells' journey, and I remember going to visit Zagreb and everything, and it was just amazing because when I was in college, we'd had in the library of this college, there were some dusty old books, like stuff written by, Hallison Batchelor and stuff about the history of animation. And of course, the Zagreb stuff was always like eye-poppingly awesome, mid-century, modern art influenced stuff. So it was always really cool to see. Not that it was easy to watch a lot of it in the 90s. Thankfully now on the internet, stuff is getting discovered again, you know.
Right. And the UPA out of the US was, you know, the UPA style was this kind of
That's what I would have been more familiar with. Like we saw some Alice and Bachelor cartoons growing up. We saw the Hungarian folktales, amazingly. I guess RTE played them. And then of course UPA. So those were the stylized cartoons I'd seen as a kid. Right. But there was so much more that I'd never seen because there was a whole festival world of Eastern European animation that had never made its way to Irish TV, you know.
Yeah. Zagreb did have questions they sent us here. So here's one of them. Wolfwalkers is a fairy tale suitable for almost all ages, I guess. But there's also historical context, religious fanaticism, and also, you know, comments on women's roles and so forth. So they wanted, Zagreb asked, Kilkenny is your studio's hometown where all of you are, or most of you, I guess. Could you give us some insight into the concept of the film as an allegory for our times because of the various religious and social comments that are in Wolfwalkers, women's role and so forth?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of there is definitely a strong, I suppose, feminist angle in there that found its way in when we realized that Robin, our main character, needed to be a girl. But the original stuff that Ross and I were thinking about was more about, you know, species extinction and habitat destruction and stuff that we're both fairly concerned about. We're both, you know, interested in environmentalism and animal rights and stuff. So we started out with just the curious fact that Ireland had once been so well known for wolves, it was called Wolfland. And also that Ireland's national baddie, Oliver Cromwell, had been responsible for wiping out a lot of the wolves. And so that was just the genesis of the story for us. And of course, the fairy tales and mythology about wolfwalkers from this region in Kilkenny are kind of less well known today than they were. Maybe the movies brought them back to the fore, but we wanted to kind of reinvent them and reimagine them. And then, you know, over the process of making a movie, themes appear and arrive and become stronger and so forth. So a lot of different themes about polarization of society grew very naturally from what we were seeing on the news and how reflected it was in our research into that time period, you know. And these kind of rulers who rule by fear haven't gone away, or who rule by kind of trying to divide people and turn people against each other and stuff. They haven't gone away. So there's a modern resonance. And I was happy to discover that there was a definite allegory for a young woman growing up in that time. I mean, obviously it was even more extreme back then, but I think still today, a young woman trying to find her way, going against what society is telling her she should be or should do, is still pretty relevant, I think, to young women. So I was happy to see that as well come to the fore.
When you're making these films and you come across that, you know, you start with the idea that this is going to be we're going to make a comment. Most animated films make a comment of some sort about life in general, life lessons like that. You're going to make a comment about, you know, global warming or you know, something like, or animal rights. And then suddenly you find other things like, in this particular case, rulers and so forth. And you're still telling a fairy tale for children. How does that, and it has to not only tell the story that way, but it has to tell the story visually. How does that come as you're developing? Do you have conscious discussions about that with everybody? Mark, well, do you deal with this?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the way that a lot of that stuff, a lot of the comment stuff, a lot of the historical context stuff, all comes with it if you focus on kind of the rest of it. So like one of the things that you know, we used to talk about quite a bit was there's a drive, say, with the father character Bill, there's a drive to want to make him your focus constantly, right? Because he's like, because you know, Tom, Ross, Will, the writer, me as the AD, we were kind of, you know, middle-aged men basically, and like we kind of identify with this guy, and if you do that, then I think all your focus will become on something like you will start to think about, oh yeah, you know, the themes of kind of religious fundamentalism and of blindly following leaders and of everything like that. I think all this stuff works well because instead the focus was, this is the story of these two girls and their friendship, and you have that, and you have it in this time about Ireland, in this place. If the time and the place, all the context and the themes kind of come with it, but what you really have to focus on is making this film about the story of these two girls. And I think that was something that we had to constantly course correct ourselves on whenever we got too focused on anything like that, on any religious comment or environmental comment or anything like that. Just make it about the girls, you know.
Right. And the others will come. The others will be.
Yeah.
Now, visually, this film's looser than as far as I was concerned of viewing it. This film's looser than, say, Kells or Song of the Sea. In fact, there are places in there where it reminded me, not texturally or drawn wise, but of 101 Dalmatians, in that you could see some of the 100%. Construction lines, which I loved, by the way, and you could, you know, certain areas that were looser. And there was, Maria, you had characters that had to live within the environments you were designing. Did you find that easy to deal with, or was it difficult to deal with in that the characters were so flexible, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I think like it was just to find a balance between the characters and the backgrounds, because sometimes you had a background that has a lot of lines, so we actually need more lines, looser lines on the characters in order to fit with the background, or sometimes we would remove a little bit of lines so it would fit better with the character. So I think it was always that type of like trying, testing, what is the balance so everything fits together. But yeah, we had the 101 Dalmatians as a reference a lot for the backgrounds, and I think it translates later for the characters as well. You can see that some of them has offset ink and paint, and that was really cool. So yeah, I think it was all the time trying to make fit the characters on the background. So yeah.
Nora has told me recently that she bit her tongue, but wasn't convinced it was all going to come together when she saw concept art at the start. And maybe, so she said she was pleasantly surprised how well it all came together. Possibly largely due to Maria Pareja.
There you go, Maria. You got a bona fide there from Tomm and from Nora. Now, here's everybody always, you know, besides the big picture questions, they want to know the gossip. So here's a question I've always wondered about. Every studio and every picture that I know about has had a crash and burn moment, or more than one, where things got little, for some reason or another. Now, I would suspect that happens at Cartoon Saloon as well.
No, never.
What do you do when you have those moments? What happens, generally speaking?
It really depends on where they come from, Frank. I mean, where Ross and I were at Loggerheads, that could be problematic, but we knew we couldn't let the production suffer. So we usually took some time apart and tried to find a compromise when we came back together. The other time that comes to mind when we talk about this on Wolfwalkers, and there was more than one or two, there was plenty of times, but one time was we had a co-producer in Luxembourg, and they had a slot for when they needed to get to work, and we didn't feel the animatic was ready to go ahead. I sort of wasn't ready to kind of compromise this time, because I felt it was kind of like, for me, the third feature that I'd been through, and I knew that exactly what Mark was talking about earlier, we focused too much on the adult characters in the first act and the backstory, and we wanted to rewrite it to really focus on Robin and Maeve's story, and particularly Robin's story, and simplify it. And so we had to negotiate with our co-producers in Luxembourg to take an extra 8 months, and they had to take on other work to keep themselves busy until we were ready to go ahead. And that's a tough fight, and that's a difficult situation to be in, because business and people's careers and livelihoods are butting up against the needs of a, you know, an artistic need, you know. So it would have been more convenient for everyone if we'd gone ahead with the original draft of the first act. But I think it was worth fighting to do it better. In the long term, I think it was better, you know. But there's always the fear you'll lose talent and they're not going to wait around until you're ready, or the, you know, the ship is sailing already, and you know, you kind of can't. So that was like an exceptional executive decision, I'd say, at the start to keep going. That was a bit hairy for production and the managers, but I think it was the right decision overall.
When that happens and you have to have something like that, do you have other projects you can put people on? I know you do TV at the Wolfwalkers.
Yeah,
Mark, you produce some television.
Yeah, well, we try.
Yeah.
Yeah, we you know, we have plans. We have, you know, a 5-year plan of different projects that are coming up, and we are trying to slot them in. We want to line people up. We want to give people a break if possible. But like, that's the best laid plans. I mean, you just, when it actually comes to it, you always feel like, you know, you have 20 animators, you feel like you're one animator short. You have 25 animators, you feel like you're one animator short. It's just, you know, it's just always gonna feel that way. And you're always going to just beg for that extra fortnight. And yeah, so it's hard to do. The thing I would say though, is that I think all that stuff, even what Tom was talking about, you know, difficulties with trying to make things work with our co-producers and everything like that. It's the human face kind of is what does it, is if you just do anything you can to keep the good old nature, to remain friends and to explain your reasoning behind everything. I think even if people have to go off for 48 hours and have a grumble, I think they will so often come back and say, you know what, like, let's do it. Let's do this. And on this film, we had, you know, there was so much goodwill because so many people believed it was just going to be great, you know, so.
I found that in sense of humor plays a big part in getting through some of those kind of things. Oh yeah, remember, it's a cartoon.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, the thing that was a phrase I've had over the years, that when things seem, you know, things can get really stressful, and I've been definitely a bit of a stress head at certain moments. But yeah, you have to remember it's just a cartoon at the end of the day. It's not brain surgery or anything. Yeah.
So yeah, that's I used to use that phrase a lot. So now I know we talked a little bit about this. You know, so many, especially in features, so many studios are technology driven. You've also said you use a lot of computers as well as traditional art. How do you communicate between the two? Is there a liaison between the people who are doing the artwork and people who are doing the, say, the compositing or the technology, or is it sort of, does your pipeline sort of flow through? Do you have a kind of a standard pipeline that works when you're going through your shows?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I was saying a little bit. As much as possible, we have tried to keep our pipeline nice and simple, and so that it would feel the same going from one to another. So ideally, what I really want, I'm Cartoon Saloon's the studio technical director as well. So this is kind of something that I think about all the time, trying to move from one project to another. I really want it to be that if you're a layout artist on one of our TV shows and then you get, you know, you move over to work on Wolfwalkers or something like that, I want the way you work to be so similar to the way you worked on the other, just in terms of who do I talk to, where do I send my notes, how am I going to speak to my, you know, everything like that. Get all that the same. Then all they have to worry about is getting on style and making things beautiful, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So we just want to pull all the admin, everything like that out of it. So we work the same as most modern studios. You know, we use Shotgun and production management system. We take all the rendering happens in our servers, everything like that. We really just want people to have a simple to-do list and work like that, try to get notes through everything. At this point, I would just have to say, as we think of it all as like, oh, it's this computer system. It is a computer system, but it's only as good as the people who are involved. So the gel of all of these things is your production manager, your production coordinators, having them constantly just aware of what's moving where, what's gone backwards, what's had to get looked at again. And for me, they were just these like force multipliers of everything. Anytime we made this call that affected 3 or 4 departments, I just knew that if I explained calmly to the right coordinators, I wouldn't have to worry about it. It would all be taken care of. So again, it's a human factor.
And when you're working style, and you mentioned it just now, Mark, so I'm gonna go to Maria about this, getting people up on style. I mean, the styles are different. We talked about this, the styles of the different things. You're getting people up on style. You're the art director, the production designer, Maria. Do you have a crew? It's not just one person doing everything. So you have to get them to be used to the style. And is that and then, you know, do it so that it can then move on to the next phase. Is there a ramp-in period for that? Do you have time to spend time getting everybody up to speed, so to speak, on the style of this particular picture?
Yeah, I think like at the beginning, most of the people who start in production were people who was working pre-production already, so they kind of knew the style. But then when more people was joining the team, suddenly, yeah, you start having these moments where like, I don't still get the style, or this is very tricky. For the town, it was a little bit easier, but for the forest, we had a little bit more problem because it's very sketchy and everyone's sketching away. And so it's very difficult to do a sketchy flower all the same by 10 different persons. So that's why I was doing a lot of style guides, and we did a few workshops with the artists in the background departments. So they could knew and understand exactly how to approach the style in order to get them all in the same style. So I think at the end, every time that an artist would arrive to the team, they would have probably like a week of adaptation to the style. And after that, I mean, obviously always there's notes, but the artists on the background teams were super talented. So they got it very quick. And at some time they were just like flying through the style.
So now that kind of draws me to another question. Back when I was working in the big studios, they used to cast animators a certain way. That one's good for you know, crowd scenes. This one's good for you know, exciting scenes. This one's good for the emotional stuff, and they would typecast in a way some of the animators. Do you have animators that are and production people that are good for one thing, better for one thing than another, and do you typecast, or do you work against that typecasting, or do you do a little of both?
A little of both, I'd say. You try not to typecast too much, but certainly Maria could attest that in the backgrounds there was people that were more suited to the forest and other people. Like we even had one of the artists was a printmaker, you know, she makes linoc of prints. So she was perfect for the woodblock style. That was really suited her because that's how she worked. That was what her background was. But in terms of animation, yeah, we had a few people that would petition for certain scenes, maybe because they felt they were being typecast. They'd be asking, I want to animate this or that or the other. And we also had a lot of people that were in the cleanup department. It wasn't just a standard cleanup style. So we had a couple of artists who'd worked with Joanna Quinn and had that lovely scratchy style. So they were great for the pencily style. Or when James Baxter said he wanted to do a few scenes, we said, just throw the wolves at him, make him do four-legged stuff, you know. So some things are just obvious, right? And then there's other ones that, and definitely there's people that like, you know, they're going to do a great job of a cartoony scene, but maybe they're so tired of being given all the cartoony scenes that they'll really get their teeth into something more dramatic and knock you out of the park, you know. So it's fun to keep it mixed up. And we work with supervisors like Sven, who was the animation supervisor, and cleanup supervisor John Walsh, to keep people from being too typecast, even though we might rely on certain people for certain styles.
How far was the show in when you guys had to go to lockdown?
Oh, we were nearly done. We were practically finished cleanup. Yeah. We had some ink and paint and well, we had a good chunk of compositing to do and some ink and paint to do. So unfortunately, most of the compositing was done by people in their bedrooms, and that wasn't ideal, but we managed to make it work. And then there was just enough of a easing of restrictions that we could go to Paris for 2 weeks to do the final sound mix. But I would usually be at the sound mix for weeks, you know, but we found a way that the designers would kind of send something that they thought was pretty good, and with good headphones and stuff, I could check it. So when we went over, there weren't any like big surprises. It was just more making sure you know, Ross and I were happy with the final mix. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of always enjoyed that last bit. Usually the compositing in previous movies I'd worked on were all done in Belgium. So I was used to the tail end being away from home a lot. You know, first you do all the compositing and then you're in, usually in Paris for all the sound work. And this time we did it all from home and it worked pretty well. I don't know what the artist would say, but for me, it was actually surprisingly more successful than I would have imagined. If you told me at the start of production we had to do it like that, I might have had a little panic attack and thought it would never work. But it's amazing how, you know, necessity is the mother of invention and all that.
I just talked with the crew that did Raya, the new Disney picture, and they said they did almost the whole picture at home. They were, I think they were 9 shots in before they had to go down and go on lockdown. And they said it was interesting because they had to rely a little bit more on their artists far away from each other, kind of taking some more initiative to get the things done because they couldn't be with them all the time over their shoulder, and it actually worked out. So
well, it looked great in the end. Mark, you're deep in all from home feature film now. So.
Yeah, it is, and it is very different. Certainly with Wolfwalkers, we had absolutely formed a groove entirely. Like we knew exactly how we were, like all the artists, even the comp artists who had only done, you know, about 50% of the movie, they all knew exactly what the movie was supposed to look like. So I think it was a lot easier for us. This movie we're on now, My Father's Dragon, it's so different. It was born entirely into the kind of work from home world. And I think, God, I mean, I'm just going to be repeating myself now, but I mean, it's all about trying to just make this as human as possible, because it's the hardest part is just people sitting in the same room kind of every day, not going anywhere and not seeing each other and not just kind of having a laugh. So as much as possible, we're just trying to get people gathering together and just having sort of having kind of proper like crew gatherings and people making jokes and everything like that. So it's hard. It's a harder thing to pull off than I think just finishing off Wolfwalkers was.
Yeah. Wolfwalkers was sort of already in the glide path to the end, and it's kind of a good segue, because what I always like to ask at the end of these talks is what's next. And I know that we have the dragon picture next, another dragon picture. So
dragons are so hot right now.
Yeah, dragon tight. Anyway, so what is next besides the feature?
Well, there's 2 features in production at the moment, which is mad for a saloon. We've got the Puff and Rock movie for preschoolers based on the show on Netflix, and then also for Netflix we have My Father's Dragon. And we have a big series with Apple, which is more like a 8-hour movie than a series. It's like a serial. The script for both, like for the whole thing, is written in advance. That's an epic job, and that's just getting ramped up. And
is
what else? Is
that the Viking School?
No. The Viking School is kind of a smaller co-production. We just focused on the design, and most of it was made in France. But yeah, we did the design. We finished Viking School design last year at some point, and it's all being produced in France with Disney. So no, I can't really say anything more about the Apple series than exactly that it exists and it's epic and big.
So you're talking about like an 8-episode show?
No, maybe more episodes. But 8 hours of story,
8 hours.
if you know what I mean. Yeah. And that's in production now. And we have a series that's looking really strong, another preschool. We're busy. It's more than I think we've ever been, honestly. And like, I think there's like 200 and something people working in just the saloon, and we have a sister studio, Lighthouse, similar size. So despite the fact that we're all sitting in our bedrooms and don't see each other, there's quite a lot of activity happening around Kilkenny.
Maria, what projects are you on of these? I'm sure you're on some of them.
I'm not in any of these ones at the moment. I'm just doing visual development for future projects, so which is great. I really like it. I was working on the TV series that Tomm was mentioning as well as a production designer, and that one is going to be very cool. And
stay on the development. That's the most fun.
It's very weird because I've never done development before, and I really like to have a little bit of the pressure of production. and I like to be working fast and having deadlines and having stuff. So I'm finding myself a little bit like, this is too chill. I need some deadlines soon. If not, I'm going to explode. But
Mark,
it's really good. It's really good.
Deadlines for Maria, please.
Please.
Yeah, I've got
Now-
all the deadlines you could want. Seriously.
Now, in the United States now, we're starting to open up again, you know, and I would suspect that soon it'll be easy for people on the cruise to get back together. Whether they will or not, I think there may be some overlap, not overlap, but development that a lot of animation can be done long distance. And I know you do. I mean, James Baxter worked on Wolfwalkers and he was here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But are things going to open up? Does it look good for Ireland to open up pretty soon, and Europe to open up pretty soon, or not?
Yeah, I never felt so young waiting for the vaccine. I think it's going to be under 45s next week or something. So as soon as I'm vaccinated, I'm gone. No, I'm joking. But I think once everyone's vaccinated, it'll be later in the year. We've just signed a lease on a really big building in town, and so hopefully we'll all, as many people as can or want to come back in. I know Maria and the director of her project are mad to get back into the office, so hopefully you guys will be back. And but yeah, I'm sure we'll have learned a lot of lessons from this, that production will be able to take on board how efficient it can be for people to not have to work, you know, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, that there's more flexibility that way. Hopefully we'll keep the good and from both ways and find some way to do both. I don't know. Well,
I'm going to let you guys get back to it then. It's the middle of the week already, so
back to work, Maria. You've got a deadline.
I want to thank all three of you, Tom, Maria, and Mark, for spending time with us. I really appreciate it, and thanks very much. ASIFA, thanks for Zagreb. It'll be on Zagreb soon, and so Zagreb, we'll see you later. I can't fade out here. I'd love to fade out. I'm waiting for Zoom to develop a fade out button instead of a cutoff button, but I think this will be it. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, everyone.
See you again.